by the way.
Hey, Christoph.
Hello.
Yeah, please go on, Alex.
Well, I was saying, okay, so yeah, my understanding is that there's been work on the P2P specs. And yeah, again, if there's like questions that anyone on this call has, like we can chat about them now. I was talking with your and drawer, and one thing that came up was essentially just thinking about how to handle user op propagation, so like message propagation when there's like different mempools with like different resource constraints. So maybe I'll just confirm my understanding here. Like the idea is that there's basically this one channel. So like even in the specs today, there's user ops with entry point. So that's basically like the main topic, let's say, for any user ops. My understanding is that we now want to support other channels for like, say, more powerful bundlers or different nodes on the network. Yeah. Okay. So one point that, and again, this is like kind of a detail, but worth discussing, was essentially the case where if you have a message that goes out on, well, yeah, so let's say you have this topic right now, user ops with entry point. Let's say you then have another topic like, heavy user ops with entry point, because for some reason the user ops like need more resources to verify. Maybe they're like huge, bundles. I think we call them that. These like aggregates of user ops. Anyway, point being is there was a question about libp2p and its behavior around the following fact, which is if I have this message, this like lightweight user op, if I want to publish to both the light and heavy channel, like would this somehow send the same message twice to one peer? And like we don't really need this because that's just consuming bandwidth, right? That you don't need to. And yeah, so I have a little more bit clarity on that, which is basically that the way it would almost certainly work is that your meshes, like your peer set for each topic, would just not even be the same. So I think if you try to be more clever around, which topics you sent messages on based on what you've seen on one versus the other, you'll probably lead to some like weird propagation patterns that would lead to not what we want. Yeah. Does that?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. But at the moment, there's just one main global topic though, which is user ops. But I mean, the thing that you're describing probably would arise if we have two multiple global topics. Yeah.
Or even more. So I think that was, at least I think we're like, we're thinking about this is like, there could be many mempools with like different requirements or like abilities to opt in. And so then this question kind of comes up.
So at the moment, the mempool ID is also described as one of the, global topic, part of the global topic. So each bundler client can subscribe to only those mempools that they are interested in. Yep. So yeah, I'd appreciate if you can go through the spec and provide your feedback. That would be really valuable.
Yeah, certainly, I can take a look.
In the meanwhile, I was working on a POC based on the existing spec just to get something in place before we have everything ready. It's not, ready for testing yet, but I'll share as soon as that's fine. But I'd like to understand, get a feedback on the SSE types and the other things that I have specified there. And a couple of things which I needed clarity or which questions I had while implementing the POC was, it was not clear to me what was the need in the consensus clients to have something called an ETH2 field. I've tried to, get away from that in the current bundler spec, but I didn't know what problem it was looking to solve. So I didn't know if we had to include that in our bundler P2P spec as well. Is that something you're aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so yeah, I'm looking at the spec here now. There's a metadata, there's like a seek number, which we'll want if we want to keep this. And then there's this like mempool nets. So Right. So the reason this is in like the ETH2 key for this metadata or this this information in the consensus layer is to communicate to nodes which attestation subnets they're on, and then also this extends to supporting sync committees as well with Altair and later. Point being is it's like used to like help with discovery. So like right now when you like do discovery, disk V5, let's say, like there's no way to like differentiate your peer beyond getting this information. So that's why it was added, because like, for example, let's say there's like these attestation subnets and you only need like half of them just because of like what you're validating at the moment, then you could use this to kind of filter and refine your peer set as to know who to talk to, which subnets you want to be on, and things like this. That being said, these subnets so like map onto gossip sub channels that are distinct from the global topic. So yeah, especially if there's only the one global topic right now, then I don't think we would need this. That being said, I will go look at the spec to make sure I understand everything correctly. But I don't know, like we could claim, hey, we want to be more forward compatible with like multiple mempool nets. So like, we'll just go ahead and do this. I would kind of suggest leaving it out unless we really think we need it.
Okay, that's fine. And the other question, it was agreed, at least till now, on the bundler network, P2P network, we are not going to maintain any state and individual client nodes. That's how the spec has been written as well, but I'm not sure if that assumption or that, or rather that decision would work well. Do you anticipate any issues with a bundler client not maintaining a local state?
Well, what does that mean?
For example, in
if
consensus
they're
client, you
taking user
maintain
ops
your
making a bundle, then like they would need the local execution state, right? Like they would need to know what's valid and what's not. I don't think user ops are stateless in this way, right?
That's right, but my worry was more in terms of if a particular bundler node in the network never receives a message from any of its connected peers, it would have no means to determine whether that is as per that is really because there were no messages or because the connected peers themselves are not passing any messages to it.
Right. And so why do we need to differentiate this? I believe there are heartbeat like protocols within libp2p that would handle like peer liveness and things like this.
So in the consensus spec, when during the heartbeat, each node validates whether the state of the connected peer to know whether the peer is propagating the correct state, right? Because we don't maintain individual states in the bundler network, how would each client know whether the connected peer is in the correct state or is incompatible?
Yeah. So what do we mean by state? Are we talking about like the execution state, or like is there a 437 specific state?
I meant what do you call the fork ID or something that is maintained, the current timestamp that each consensus network is. The term fails me. Just give me a minute. I'd have to go back to the spec.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I mean, there is a essentially a fork ID, but that's just to scope topics to like the fork of the chain. And so I suppose we'd want to version things here as well in the same way. But that being said, like all you'd really need your bundler client to do is say, I assume they know the slot. And then from there, you can know which epoch it is. And from which epoch, you can know which fork you're in. And that could pretty much all be hard-coded as long as you know the current time. Okay.
So I was referring to epoch. Right. We don't do any validation against epoch or slot in the bundler network. So that's where my question more is how would we validate that each client on each node on the bundler network is in an ideal state,
like on the same fork as us?
Exactly.
Right. That's a good question. So I don't know enough about the bundler clients and their architecture to like say exactly. So what I can say is that, yeah, I mean, at a certain point, okay, so like the naive thing is we just ignore this and there's just the one topic and you just gossip user ops and like hope for the best. I think there's a lot of reason to like try to scope them to like fork or chain to the extent that we can. There's a fork hash on the EL, which is maybe the thing we want to look at using. I mean, at this point, they're like in lockstep, so to speak, between EL and CL. But then, yeah, you would, I mean, this could be a place for the metadata is you just say like, well, hang on. Would it matter? Okay, so I think what we claim is that we scope the topics by network, right? So like the fork, like whatever the fork identifier is, that's like in the topic itself. And then I guess the concern is we want to validate the messages we receive. The thing is, if we get these messages and like they don't make sense to us locally, then we downscore the peer or eventually kick them. So I don't know if we need to like coordinate in this way. Like I don't know if we need to know necessarily if a peer is like good to go, because I think it'll just become clear. And yeah, because usually more like this kind of concern comes up when you're syncing, and like I don't think there's anything to sync.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're just talking about gossip,
why would we need this? Because we are validating every message that comes into the bundler from a peer, and you can just score peers based on if they're giving you terrible messages. There's like a full validation thing in there. I did notice though that we don't have any sort of versioning on the gossip topic, other than the mempool ID, which isn't necessarily like a version. Whereas like in the consensus spec, they have the fork ID, which I think kind of plays as a version number.
Right.
I'm curious if we need that, or if we would always just change the mempool ID when we want to version that topic.
My understanding was every time you change the entry point contract, you would eventually end up with a new mempool ID, because you would publish that what do you say, YAML or JSON file to IPFS, and the key the IPFS hash that's generated would be new altogether.
Yeah, agreed. But is there any reason why we would want to change the messages that we're passing without changing the entry point contract? I guess we're only just sending the user op object around, so we would have to be adding some metadata to that or something, because of the user op format.
So yeah, let me ask a question just so I understand. So when I see a user op, there's the essentially like the validation part and the execution part, and bundlers will just run the validation part, right? So then
no, they would,
this is a go ahead.
No, sorry. They validate, and then they also submit it to on chain, right? So they execute it as well.
Okay, but I guess more in terms of like when we're thinking about gossip. So like even before we like have a bundle, we try to get on chain. Then all we need to do is make sure this validation holds. And so then from there, I mean, that is like a stateful operation. So then bundlers have a local EL, and they can apply these. There's some way to like run the validation code against the entry point, is my understanding, and then see what happens there. Okay, so yeah, I mean the thing is like you could think about how scoped we want this to be, because you could imagine like again, there's just one global topic, and I just like try to validate everything, and essentially if there is some like hard fork such that like something changed, then it would just fail, and then that would be that. We could of course be like more sophisticated about that and like scope things and try to be more tightly typed, so to speak. Yeah, I think that just depends on like what the bundle clients think is important or relevant.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Apart from that,
sorry. One more thing there. So when I get a user op, does it say like, this should execute against this block hash or the state hash or something like this, or it's just there? There's nothing within the message that scopes it already, is my question.
No, I mean, the message, the global topic for user op doesn't have anything related to block hash, but it's expected that the peer has simulated that user op before that has been propagated to us. But we don't, the client does not specify against which block number was a given user op simulated against. But do you see value in providing that as well, or?
Yeah, I don't think we need to. The thing is, if you have it, it's like a hint, right? It like tells the
Yeah.
bundler client like exactly what to do. So that could be helpful. We have to think about like expiry and all of this, right? Like as things change, like what does this number mean and how should it evolve? So yeah, again, I think we leave it out for now. Which is
Okay.
another question I have is like, what's like the deployment timeline here? Like, because the point I would get to is like we should just do the simplest thing that we think will work, and then
Yeah.
like ideally deploy it live, and then as problems come up, we can think about how to fix them. But we could just sit here all day and like come up with arbitrary things if like
Yeah.
there's no feedback.
Now, fair enough. I mean, I don't have a clarity or an idea of when this is likely to go live as well. I just volunteered to write the spec. I'm hoping for Yo and Ro to let us know how to proceed. Once we are sure the existing P2P spec is in good, has nothing obviously wrong, then we could probably proceed and define the dates and everything else going forward.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
So yeah, I didn't have any further questions. Does anybody else on the call have any?
No, I'm just curious on your latest PR. It doesn't look like you've gotten any feedback yet.
No, I haven't. I was hoping someone would respond, but I understand that everyone was busy with E10, so.
But just to double or kind of clarify what that PR is doing, it's providing the request response for
Yeah.
like initial mempool population when you come online.
Correct.
Sweet. So the idea would be that you only are using that request response when you have a kind of a new peer connection.
Correct.
I did notice this, and it's slightly different than what Dev P2P does. Is that I think it's the kind of the newly online peer is responsible for requesting hashes, whereas I believe in Dev P2P, when a connection is created, they just send all of the hashes that they know about, kind of
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
and forth. I'm wondering if there's a reason why we chose to do something different there, or if that's just more the lib P2P way to do it.
I think it's the lib P2P way to do it. I don't know, for some, I think there was an explanation I found somewhere in the consensus spec which said that this was probably more efficient way of message delivery across connected peers.
Got it. Makes sense. And then I think I just had a small question. I think when you request hashes, and I can put this on the PR, but when you request hashes, my guess is that 256 is too small for a limit there. We'll want to up that. I think we've got 256 as the limit for like user ops is a good, like for the actual return value is reasonable. But for when requesting hashes, we should probably be able to request.
Okay, I think, yeah, I think on the consensus spec, I saw something like 4096 was the highest or something. We can always change that. That's not an issue. But yeah, if you can add that comment on the PR, that'll be helpful.
Yep, I'll start the combo on the PR. One other question I had, that's something that's already in the spec, and maybe we're just kind of waiting for more guidance on this, or maybe it's just a local.
Could I actually interject a question? Do we need to sync other people's mempools at all? So if I was following the thing we were just talking about, this PR number 5, it's adding basically this ability to like sync user ops from another peer. And my question is like, do we need to do that at all? Like essentially you wouldn't have what's in the pool, but then you would just get all the new stuff from Gossip.
Yeah, but there could be scenario where a particular bundler might not find one of the user ops in their local pool to be relevant or profitable for it to submit it. So we are just ensuring that there might be others in the network who might find that transaction to be profitable for themselves. I mean, for some weird reason. So for example, you have a bundler which is actively censoring transactions of a given wallet. So if another client comes up and newly joins the network, maybe that censorship wouldn't happen. That's the only thing I can think of.
I mean, I acknowledge the problem and agree this is a solution. I think another way to think about it in that scenario is you just put that burden, so to speak, on the user to like rebroadcast. Perhaps with like a higher fee or something, but
there is
yeah.
one feature of the, at least of the like the entry point contract, is the notion of like this valid until, valid after. So you can return a timestamp with validation that says, hey, this user operation is valid after this time. So that's one, like, so that I think the idea behind that is just so that users don't have to kind of resubmit their user ops. They can say, hey, this operation will be valid after time whatever. So that might be one reason to kind of sync mempools, is so that you could get all of those. But also, I don't know how much that feature is going to be used. So it might just be one of those things where it's not a huge deal to actually sync those. I could also see potentially there being, these alternative mempools needing this sort of feature, using a similar kind of conditional transaction like approach. But
yeah. I mean, limit order based user ops, limit orders using user ops might require this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, conditional user ops.
User ops.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Dan, I think I interrupted another question you had.
No, good. That was a good question. I also agree that there might be a premature optimization to do the initial syncing, but it doesn't seem like it's that difficult to put together. If we find that it has issues, maybe it's something that can fall out of V0 if we need to. But yeah, so my next question, and this is just a little nitpick. What we say we ignore operations, kind of related, ignore operations that were validated too far in the past. In one of these sentences, I'm trying to find it. So I guess my question is, what is too far in the past?
Yeah. This was a question I had for Yo as well, but we never came to an agreement on what we define. If you understand, earlier in this discussion, I was referring to simulation at a given block number, right? Before a particular user op is propagated in the P2P network, each bundler that receives that has to simulate it, check whether it's valid before it's propagated. It was agreed that the block number would be a part of that when it's propagated across the network. And if a particular client receives a user op which was validated too far away, but we have never defined how far away that is. So that's another thing that I needed clarity on. I haven't included that in the spec, but I'll probably tag Yo and others there to see. Let's probably come to an agreement on what that should be. And that probably makes sense that we should probably include the block number as well as a part of the user op global topic, so that others are aware when the validation or simulation actually happened.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there's also something around this, this valid, these valid after, valid before timestamps that kind of interacts with that. Like, let's say you do a valid after a year in the future and you're just squatting in the mempool, like that probably shouldn't be something that you want to do. Maybe you have to pay for it, you have to stake something. I was a little bit confused as to kind of how that interacts with the mempool. So yeah, let's get more clarity on that. I guess my last question here is pretty nitpicky, but do we really want to use like /account abstraction as our prefix to this?
I don't know. It was just my suggestion. If you think there's a better way to do that, I'd be happy to include it.
I would just say ERC 4337. I feel like that's
all right. I chose ERC 4337, but then I decided to move it to account abstraction because it was. Nobody understands what outside the Ethereum world, because this was supposed to be a generic spec for any EVM chain, right? ERC 47 is more specific to Ethereum. So
that's valid. I just brought it up for discussion. If anyone has other reasons, I just feel like account abstraction is very generic.
I agree. So one question I had for Stokes was on what would you recommend for writing the test scripts for the the P2P interface, should we fork Hive and define the simulation there, or would you recommend any other approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what exactly do we want to test? Like, do we want to like, so one option, yeah, would be like Hive, where essentially we'd like add support for bundler clients and then like write Hive tests to like test various things.
Mhm.
That's generally how we do this type of thing with like the execution and consensus layer clients. You could be more targeted. So like, for example, we also have like spec tests where like we could imagine like making more of these like unit like test vectors that bundler clients could consume. Yeah. What sounds helpful?
I think there's already
Maybe all of
one
it.
API specific test suits that's already available in the ETH Infinitism repo. But because we have multiple bundler implementers, each implementing in their own language, I thought I was wondering if Hive would be a better way to test it rather than otherwise we cannot. Can we really test interoperability across clients if there was just specs on individual bundler
Yeah, I mean,
repositories?
something like Hive will make it a lot easier. I guess the question is like, who cares that all the clients conform? Like, is there one group or entity that like would take responsibility and be like, hey, like, we're gonna have this Hive thing, we're gonna run it like every release, every month, every week, every nightly. There's like different ways to think about this, but yeah, like to the extent that you say, hey, like I really want to, test all these implementations, then yeah, that something like that I think would make sense in terms of a Hive thing.
So yeah, this is the group that's going to be responsible. That's basically us here discussing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a trivial amount of work. I don't know if I would even. Well, yeah, I guess you want to fork Hive. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we do that. We'd add support, and then there's a way to like write test within Hive to like, script different components and send messages around and see what happens.
okay, yeah, that explains it. I mean, yeah, I think I'm clear with all the questions I had. If either of you have anything, then
I have one last question for Alex. I'm just curious with your experience in the consensus layer, how you feel about the maturity of both libp2p and the Discovery v5 across different languages. If we're going to run into any issues, and we're writing in Rust. I think there's people writing in Go. There's people writing in TypeScript. It does seem like I think it kind of mirrors what's going on in the consensus layer ecosystem. So I'm just curious if there's anyone seen any big issues with any of those libraries up to this point.
Yeah, I would say no. I mean, at this point, it's like what's driving Ethereum, and Ethereum keeps working, it seems. So I think in terms of just like general maturity or like maintenance issues, there really aren't any. Someone could try to write a bundler in some like language that's like less supported. For example, there isn't like a great libp2p stack in like C# for like the .NET ecosystem. There's like work underway, I know, from different players in the space to like push that along. And that'd be a great asset for anyone in the ecosystem who wants to like build on top of that. But yeah, I mean, I talked a bit with Yoav and Dror about this when I met them at ETH Denver, and it was basically like, yeah, like what's the relative maturity, like especially compared to like libp2p. But yeah, like to me, I would go with libp2p. I think there's even some intention to sort of tunnel dev-P2P over libp2p so that it just like becomes a unified stack and all of these things. Seems like the right play. You could have some bundler team run into an issue where like there's less support, but I think that's just going to be the situation.
Cool. Yeah, I think you answered my follow-up. I'm just curious if there's anyone talking in the consensus, or sorry, in the execution layer about getting rid of dev-P2P so we don't have these two different protocols running all over the place. It's a little weird, especially because like the bundler it's really an execution layer piece of software, and we're running libp2p, and then especially if we want to combine these with block builders, block builders are then going to be running dev P2P. So you're running both of these protocols potentially in the same binary if you do combine them at some point. So it's a little weird. Are there any timelines on that, discussions going on, or is it just something that people want eventually?
Well, I was just looking up the issue for it. So this is, sorry, I have way too many windows open on my computer right now. There's an issue on the P2P repo to like talk about this migration to the P2P. And yeah, I don't think it's like anyone's top priority, but even as recently as like a month or two ago, there's been like, you know, some motion there. So it's something people are thinking about. And yeah, I mean, we're just kind of at a point in things where it's like, there's just going to be this like dual stack sort of situation where you are running multiple protocols and different people are talking different things. And this is just our merged life until we change something about it.
Yeah, makes sense. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Dan, I'm curious, is your bundler, available on GitHub yet?
Not yet. Not yet. We're still kind of just heads down, cranking on it.
Okay.
We'll get it up there when we're happier with what it looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I understand. I mean, we went through the same phase as well. We just open sourced it last week. So yeah.
Yeah. Our plan is to, at least get it passing the spec, and then we'll throw it up and open it up for anyone who wants to.
So it's interesting. We've got 2 Rust bundlers now, 1 on Go and 2 TypeScript.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Dan. If no further questions. So yeah, we'll meet again in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Thanks.
Nice talking to you guys. See ya.
Nice talking to you. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Good to see you on. Bye.
Bye.